Nothing that's going on with this Zika thing passes the sniff test. Nothing. Nothing that they're telling us at all.
We move on now to the growing Zika emergency in America. A new case being confirmed tonight.
Just as I was getting ready to turn on the recorder to talk to you guys about this, the very thing that I was going to suggest was going to happen next happened as I was getting ready to record about it. You're seeing all the scaremongering over this Zika thing all over the media. The next thing they're going to tell you is they don't have a choice. They have to release the GM mosquitoes. And that's exactly what's happening. This morning they started a pesticide spraying campaign. This is a neurotoxin they're going to spray over a 10-mile radius of Miami that in studies actually causes 15% smaller brains in the babies of pregnant animals that have had this chemical tested on it. Which is kind of ironic, don't you think, since the whole scare of Zika is supposedly the fact that it causes microcephaly, which is when a baby is born with a much smaller head. It's a birth defect. Although, World Health Organization officials have come out, like Margaret Chan, who's a director general over at WHO, to say that a causal link between Zika infection and pregnancy and microcephaly has not, and I must emphasize, has not been established. And that the evidence is wholly circumstantial. Worrisome, but circumstantial. There is no causal link that they've actually been able to prove conclusively between Zika virus and microcephaly. But what are we seeing right now? I mean, you're talking about door to door. They're going door to door collecting urine samples on people.
Samples, they've been going door to door, literally trying to find out if there's evidence of infection among people.
Like it's some kind of medical martial law. You have Governor Rick Scott in Florida calling upon the CDC to activate an emergency response team because 15 whole people have gotten Zika? That's not exactly like the plague or something, but they're acting like it is.
FDA has asked that all blood donations stop in parts of Florida. That sounds serious.
What they're not telling you is that there's already been 386 cases of Zika in Florida throughout its history. They've had hundreds of cases there before, and they have not acted like this. They're even issuing travel warnings.
This sounds scary. Pregnant women don't go to Miami. Like, how scared should we be?
Well, I don't think you should be scared, but we ought to be prudent.
Putting up signs in the airport, and they're saying it's the regulators' infectious Zika incompetence that the FDA won't just allow them to release all these mosquitoes. It's anti-science ideology. They're treating it like crazy anti-vaxxers because you don't want genetically modified mosquitoes to be unleashed upon you. Two things. So first, let's talk about Zika virus itself. Zika virus was discovered by a Rockefeller Foundation scientist back in 1947, and there are decades of scientific literature exist on this virus to show that it is a largely benign virus. Up until recently when all the scaremongering started in the last few years, once they had genetically modified mosquitoes. Before that, Zika was benign. In fact, 80% of people who get Zika virus, they don't even have symptoms from it. The other 20%, they get things like a rash, a fever, joint pain. It's basically like a mild form of the flu. But they're making it sound like the bubonic plague has broken out over Florida and we all have to run around screaming like chickens with our heads cut off.
Like, how scared should we be?
So that's the first thing. The second thing is, and this has been gone over very thoroughly by Claire Burnish over at Anti-Media, these mosquitoes, these genetically modified mosquitoes, there's a real problem with the kill switch. Because what's supposed to happen is, it's only genetically modified male mosquitoes. They release them into the wild, they breed with the female mosquitoes, and then the larva never hatches, it dies. It never makes it to maturity, so you kill off large swaths of your natural mosquito population. But the whole thing is based on the lack of tetracycline present during the mosquito's development. That's a real problem because tetracycline is one of the most widely used antibiotics in livestock. And it's been thoroughly explained that 75% of antibiotics are not absorbed by the animals they're given to. Most of it's excreted in their waste. It goes into the runoff, it goes into the ground. So there's tetracycline present in the environment. It's one of the reasons we have so much antibiotic resistance these days, because there's such a huge presence of these kinds of chemicals in our environment. Not only that, but specifically in Florida, oxytetracycline is one of the main chemicals that's used to treat bacterial plant diseases in this country, including citrus plants, to mitigate bacterial plant diseases. So you're going to have this being sprayed on crops. You're going to have it be given to lots and lots of farm animals. So it's going to be present in the environment. Basing their entire thing on the lack of tetracycline is just stupid. It's ill-advised. They should have thought of a different kill switch. I mean, if this all worked perfectly and they could just play God and make everything great and there just wouldn't be any mosquitoes and there would be no negative effects to that, no bad consequences, fine, I guess. I think mosquitoes suck just as much as everyone else. They always do this Jurassic Park crap and they have no clue ultimately what's going to happen.
You're implying that a group composed entirely of female animals will breed?
No, I'm simply saying that life finds a way.
But you can look at the circumstances that they've got going on and you can see the cracks and flaws in their design pretty obviously. So this has been pointed out. In fact, they even pointed it out in one of their own documents. This is in a confidential internal Oxitec document talking about eliminating tetracycline contamination. And they talk about down here that even small amounts of tetracycline can repress the kill switch system. They had a collaborator using cat food to feed to these GM mosquito larvae. The cat food just so happened to have chicken in it. Chickens, being one of the main livestock that's given tetracycline, just so happened to have tiny amounts of tetracycline in the cat food. But it was just enough that 15% of the GM mosquitoes were surviving. 15% of their transgenic line, which means their transgenic mosquitoes are not dying the way they're supposed to. They're not only not dying, they're surviving and they're reproducing. What goes into making these GM mosquitoes? Mercola talks about this. Oxitec has inserted protein fragments from the herpes virus, E. coli bacteria, coral, and cabbage into these insects dubbed OX513A. So there you go. You have little mosquitoes flying around with herpes virus, E. coli bacteria. I mean, again, doesn't that just sound stupid? It just sounds like a bad idea. But here's where it gets extra, in my opinion, horrifying, is when you find out that the Gates Foundation, Bill Gates, the billionaire eugenicist Bill Gates, has spent $20 million funding the development of these GMO mosquitoes. He gave Oxitec $20 million towards this project. Now they're sitting around with their lab off the coast of the Florida Keys, just tapping their foot, waiting for the FDA to give them the green light to release these on people. Why is that horrifying? Have you ever seen the video where he releases a mosquito? If you haven't, now's a great time.
Now, malaria is, of course, transmitted by mosquitoes. I brought some here so you could experience this. We'll let those roam around the auditorium a little bit. There. There's no reason only poor people should have the experience.
It would be so easy to vaccinate mass populations with it. On top of that, Gates has also joked about the fact that if we just do a really good job with vaccines, we can cut the population by 15%.
Now, the world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
He's a total eugenicist.
The benefits there in terms of reducing sickness, reducing the population growth, it really allows the society a chance to take care of itself.
Like, how scared should we be?
Now what are we seeing happening? We're seeing a completely overblown scaremongering.
Is there a real danger of a woman who's already pregnant, of her fetus getting Zika if she's bitten by a mosquito carrying the Zika virus?
Well, fortunately, the risk is very small.
Of what is otherwise known as a benign virus that has now suddenly become nasty, and we should all be really afraid.
It's just such a scary thought. I know what you said and I heard you, and we shouldn't be that worried, only cautious. So, yes.
You have all these people who are signing petitions saying not in our neighborhood. You had the people living in the Florida Keys threatening to sue.
Families in this neighborhood outside Key West tonight are beyond upset.
We don't want to be lab rats.
Telling us they'll sue if the government allows a British company to release millions of genetically modified male mosquitoes near their homes in an effort to fight the Zika virus.
If this is allowed to move forward, we won't be the only place that they target to test.
And at the same time that's going on, back in January, you had the MIT Technology Review come out with this little gem. Zika virus could stir demand for GM mosquitoes. And you go down to this little cute paragraph they tucked right there on the end Release of GM bugs in the US is a possibility too, and interest in the idea might accelerate if Zika or unexplained cases of microcephaly spring up in Florida. What are the freaking odds that they said that if we just had more cases of Zika or microcephaly that we've basically linked to Zika through this made-up campaign in the media that has no official scientifically proven causal link, then that would generate an interest in GM mosquitoes that we could release on everyone. We just have to have a problem reaction solution to get it done. And now look what's happening not that many months later. What are the odds? And they're basically turning this into a situation where it's such a crisis we have no other choice than to release the GM mosquitoes on people.
Like, how scared should we be?
You have Oxitec Chief Executive Hayden Perry attending a recent congressional hearing calling for the emergency use. The Zika threat is here and now, and there's local transmission in Florida, so that's why I urge Congress to seriously consider the emergency use. We have to do it. We don't have a choice. You look at who's funding this project, what you need to ask yourselves is what's going to happen to us when we're actually bitten by one of these GM mosquitoes? Because there's no way there's not going to be GM mosquitoes reproducing in the natural environment. It's going to happen. They have set up the whole entire design with a pretty glaring flaw that essentially assures that it will. And that's a question that they have not answered. Over here at Collective Evolution, they even talk about it. They say the potential exists for these genes, which hop from one place to another, to infect human blood by finding entry through skin lesions or inhaled dust. Such transmission could potentially wreak havoc with the human genome by creating insertion mutations and other unpredictable types of DNA damage. Think about it this way. When have they ever done anything with genetically modified foods that hasn't wreaked havoc on the environment? When you're talking about all the health problems, we've seen dramatic increases in health problems since GMO food hit the market. We've seen super bugs, we've seen super weeds. They don't actually know what's going to happen ultimately with this. And they can't tell you what will happen, what will be transmitted to you from these mosquitoes. But if Bill Gates has anything to do with it, you can bet it's probably not good.
Brought some here so you could experience this. We'll let those roam around the...
Nothing that they're telling you about this passes muster. It doesn't. So what's actually going on? That's the question I have. I just wonder what you guys think of it.
Like, how scared should we be? It's just such a scary thought.